On the edge of a quiet town where the cracked pavement met endless fields of wildflowers, stood a small weather-beaten house with peeling blue paint and a sagging porch swing. Inside lived a girl named Lila Hart, barely 13, with eyes like storm clouds, full of unspoken stories and fierce quiet hope. Unlike the other children in her school who raced out the door chasing laughter and sunlight, Lila woke up before dawn, when the world was still wrapped in a soft hush. The morning light spilled weakly through the threadbare curtains as Lila slipped from her creaky bed. Her sneakers, scuffed and too small for her growing feet, whispered across the wooden floorboards. Today, like every day, she would help her father in the tiny bookstore nestled beside the faded red barn, where the scent of old paper and pine lingered thickly. Her father, a man with gentle hands and a voice that trembled like the first leaves of autumn, often said, "Dreams don't grow in riches, they bloom in the quiet moments we choose to believe." Lila didn't have many friends. At school, she was the quiet girl who always carried a battered notebook, her only refuge from whispers and sideways glances. The other kids teased her for her worn clothes and the way she read instead of playing games during recess. But beneath her shy smile burned a secret, a voice that no one had yet heard, waiting to rise like the first morning song of the meadowlark. This was no ordinary story. It was a story of courage woven in the smallest moments, of standing tall when the world expects you to shrink, of finding light in places others overlook. It was the story of a girl who dared to sing her truth, even when the silence around her was deafening. Before we journey deeper into Lila's world, ask yourself, have you ever felt invisible? Like your dreams were too fragile to speak aloud? If you believe that every soul has a song worth hearing, then this story is for you. Together, let's uncover the power of a voice that refuses to be silenced. And now, as the sun begins to climb higher, casting long shadows across the dusty road, let's follow Lila Hart as she takes the first trembling steps toward a stage she never imagined she'd stand upon. A stage that will change everything. Lila's world was small but deeply woven with love and quiet resilience. Her father, Martin Hart, was a man who had once dreamed of cities and stages, but life's twists had anchored him to this sleepy town and the family bookstore he'd inherited from his grandfather. Martin was tall and lean, his hair streaked with silver despite his only being in his early 40s. His eyes, soft and thoughtful, held stories of sacrifice and unspoken dreams, dreams he carried quietly, wrapped around the rhythm of Lila's heartbeat. "Books hold more than stories, Lila," he would say, gently pressing a dog-eared volume into her hands. "They hold the courage to imagine, to hope, and sometimes, to change." Her mother, Grace, had left when Lila was barely 2, chasing a life far beyond the cracked sidewalks of their town. Martin rarely spoke of her, but Lila had pieced together fragments, lonely nights, whispered phone calls, and the hollow ache that sometimes shadowed her father's smile. Despite the absence, Martin filled their home with warmth and routine. Every evening, they shared simple dinners of soup and bread, with Martin reading aloud passages of poetry or folk songs, hoping to plant seeds of wonder in Lila's heart. At school, Lila's life was a stark contrast to the cozy haven of the bookstore. Winslow Middle School was a place where popularity ruled like a sun blazing overhead, and Lila was a flickering candle in its shadows. The other kids, the jocks with their booming laughter, the girls with their glossy backpacks and latest gadgets, never invited her into their circles. She sat alone in the back of the classroom, her notebook always open, filled with carefully penned lyrics and sketches of melodies she barely dared to sing aloud. It wasn't just her quiet nature that set her apart. Lila's clothes were hand-me-downs, stitched up with patches, faded from countless washings. Her worn-out sneakers told stories of long walks home and afternoons spent wandering the fields rather than playgrounds. At times, she caught the cold stares and heard the whispered jokes, but she never let them define her. Instead, she wrapped herself tighter in her love for music, a secret sanctuary where her voice soared even when her body stayed still. In the small town, music was a luxury, something reserved for the talented or the privileged. But for Lila, it was the thread holding together her fragmented world. Her favorite moments were the evenings after the bookstore closed, when Martin would pull out an old guitar from beneath the counter. Together, they'd sit by the flickering light of a worn lamp, Grace's lullabies echoing faintly from a cracked cassette tape, and Lila would hum the melodies, practicing the words she hoped one day to sing in front of a crowd, not just alone in her room. Despite the challenges, Martin's unwavering belief in her gifted a quiet confidence. "Your voice, Lila," he said one night as she struggled to hold a note, "it's not about being perfect. It's about telling your story. That's what moves people." And so, beneath the weathered roof of their little bookstore, surrounded by dusty shelves and worn pages, a seed of hope grew. A hope that one day, Lila Hart would step beyond the shadows, not just to be heard, but to be seen. One crisp autumn morning, the usual hum of Winslow Middle School was pierced by an announcement that sent a ripple through the crowded hallways. The principal's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. "This week marks the start of the annual talent showcase. Any student wishing to participate should sign up outside the main office by Friday." The announcement unleashed a storm of excitement among the students. Groups formed, whispered plans were shared, and the halls buzzed with anticipation. There would be dance routines with sparkling costumes, energetic band performances, and dramatic monologues. But for Lila, the words stirred a mix of hope and fear deep in her chest. At lunch, the chatter swirled around her. "You're not seriously thinking of signing up, are you?" A boy sneered as he tossed a crumpled paper ball in her direction. "What could you possibly do? Sing like a scared mouse." Lila swallowed hard, feeling the familiar sting of humiliation, but she said nothing. She folded her hands over her notebook, the one where her songs lived, private, safe, untouched. That evening, the bookstore was quiet except for the soft crackle of the old radio Martin kept tuned to the local station. Lila sat at the kitchen table, tracing her fingers over the faded lyrics in her notebook. Her father watched her quietly, sensing the storm within. Finally, he broke the silence. "You've been thinking about it, haven't you?" Lila nodded slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if they laugh? Or worse, ignore me? I don't have fancy outfits or flashy moves. I only have my voice." Martin smiled gently and reached across the table to squeeze her hand. Sometimes, the simplest voices are the ones the world needs most. Courage isn't about not being afraid, it's about standing up and singing anyway. That night, as the house settled into sleep, Lila practiced quietly in her room. The walls, adorned with scattered posters of singers long gone, seemed to lean in as her voice wove the fragile notes of a lullaby her mother had sung before she left, a song of longing and hope. Her voice trembled at first, unsure and tentative, but with each verse, it grew stronger, fuller. The next day at school, the sign-up sheet was already half filled when Lila hesitated outside the office. Her hands shook as she clutched the small slip of paper with her name written in shaky script. She glanced around, students laughing, exchanging teasing glances, eyes occasionally flicking toward her. With a deep breath, she stepped forward and slipped her name onto the bottom of the list. Almost immediately, a ripple of snickers echoed through the hallway. "Oh, look, Lila's trying to be a singer now. What a joke!" someone whispered loudly enough for her to hear. Her cheeks burned, but she held her head high, clutching her notebook close to her chest like a talisman. The days that followed were filled with a strange mixture of dread and determination. At school, the whispers never stopped, but at home, Martin became her steadfast anchor. Every evening, he listened patiently as she sang, offering quiet praise and gentle guidance. "Remember," he told her one night, "it's not about the crowd. It's about telling your truth." Yet, the challenge loomed larger with every passing day. Lila knew that stepping onto the stage meant more than just performing. It meant exposing herself to a world that had so far only seen her as invisible. Would she find the strength to rise above the jeers? Or would the fear of rejection silence her before she even began? The morning of the talent showcase arrived like a fragile promise wrapped in the soft glow of early sunlight. Lila woke before her alarm, the familiar nervous flutter in her chest stirring restlessly. She dressed carefully in the only clean dress she owned, a simple pale blue garment that had once belonged to her mother. It was faded now, but to Lila, it was a cloak of courage. The bookstore was quiet as she slipped out, her worn sneakers tapping softly against the cracked sidewalk. Martin stood on the porch, his eyes steady and full of unspoken support. He handed her a small, folded piece of paper, a note with the words he had written the night before, "Sing for yourself. The world will catch up." At school, the auditorium buzzed with excitement and nervous energy. Colorful banners fluttered from the rafters, and the stage gleamed under the harsh glow of bright spotlights. One by one, performers took their turns, a dance troupe twirling with practiced grace, a boy strumming an electric guitar with fierce intensity, and a girl belting out a pop song into a microphone. Lila sat backstage, clutching her notebook tightly. Her fingers traced the edges of the worn pages, the handwritten lyrics a lifeline. Around her, whispers drifted like cold drafts, some curious, others dismissive. No music. Singing alone. This will be a disaster, a voice muttered nearby. Her heart pounded as the announcer's voice echoed through the speakers. Next up, a solo performance, Lila Hart. The footsteps toward the stage felt heavy and slow, yet determined. The bright lights blinded her for a moment, and the sea of faces blurred into a haze of shadows. But then, in the third row, she caught sight of her father's quiet nod, the faintest smile breaking through his usually serious expression. Lila took a deep breath, closing her eyes. The silence was vast and deep, a cavern waiting to be filled. Her voice began, a fragile thread weaving through the stillness. Are you going to Greenfield Fair? Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. The ancient folk song poured out, simple and pure. At first, there were whispers, a few distracted glances. But slowly, the room shifted. The chatter faded, replaced by an attentive hush. Lila's voice, though untrained, carried a raw honesty that slipped past walls built by cynicism and indifference. She sang not for applause or approval, but because this was her story, the night spent dreaming in a bookstore surrounded by dusty pages, the empty spaces left by absence, the quiet strength she'd gathered in solitude. Each note was a fragile declaration of existence. When the last word drifted away, the auditorium remained silent. Not because they disliked it, but because the performance had stirred something too delicate for immediate reaction. Then, a slow ripple of applause began, tentative at first, then growing, until the entire room stood, a wave of unexpected respect washing over her. Backstage, Lila's knees trembled as tears welled in her eyes. Her father was there, wrapping her in a warm embrace. "You did it," he whispered, voice thick with pride. In that moment, fear and doubt gave way to a quiet victory. Lila realized that stepping onto the stage wasn't just about being seen, it was about being brave enough to share a piece of her soul with the world. The applause still echoed softly in the auditorium as Lila stepped down from the stage, her hands trembling but her heart soaring. The crowd's unexpected warmth had shaken the walls of doubt she'd carried for so long, but she hadn't yet realized the true weight of what was about to unfold. As she made her way through the crowded hallway, a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile approached her. She wore a crisp blouse and carried a leather folder, her presence calm yet commanding. "Lila Hart, right?" the woman said, extending a hand. "I'm Elena Morris, director of the Harmony Youth Choir. I was here today with my daughter, but it was your voice that stayed with me." Lila blinked, her breath catching. "Me? But I'm not." "You have something rare," Elena interrupted softly. "A voice that carries stories, not just notes. Would you be interested in visiting our studio for an audition? There's a scholarship program for young talents, and I believe you might be a perfect fit." The words felt surreal. Lila's mind raced, searching for the right response, while Martin stepped beside her, pride shining in his eyes. He nodded slowly, encouragement flowing in his silent gesture. "Go," he said softly. "This is your moment." In the days that followed, Lila found herself stepping into a world she'd only dreamed of. The choir's rehearsal studio was a warm, light-filled space, walls lined with instruments and music sheets. Elena introduced her to the conductor and vocal coaches, each offering smiles and words of encouragement. The audition day was a whirlwind of nerves and excitement. Lila stood before a small panel, her hands clutching the same notebook filled with handwritten lyrics and melodies. Without music, without fancy equipment, she sang the lullaby her mother used to sing, her voice steady and full of emotion. Afterward, the judges exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Then Elena stepped forward, her voice bright with conviction. "Lila, we see your heart. This program can help you refine your technique, but what you already have is something that can't be taught: authenticity." The acceptance letter arrived weeks later, a pale blue envelope bearing the seal of the Harmony Conservatory. Martin held it with trembling hands as they opened it together. "Dear Lila," the letter read, "we are thrilled to invite you to join our summer program. All expenses covered. We believe your voice deserves to be heard." That night, as Lila lay beneath the stars visible through her bedroom window, she felt a quiet stirring, a promise of possibility. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, doubts, and moments when she might falter. But for the first time, she believed in herself, not because others saw her, but because she saw herself. Her father's words echoed in her mind, "Dreams bloom in the quiet moments we choose to believe." And Lila Hart had just taken her first bold step toward the light. The summer program at Harmony Conservatory was unlike anything Lila had ever imagined. The grand building, nestled in the heart of the city, gleamed with polished wood and soaring ceilings, a stark contrast to the humble bookstore and quiet fields she'd left behind. Here, students from all corners of the country gathered, each carrying their own stories, talents, and dreams. Lila felt both awed and overwhelmed. Around her were classmates with flawless technique, years of formal training, and voices that soared like eagles in the sky. Their practiced confidence made her feel small, like a fragile bird just learning to fly. The music theory classes seemed like a foreign language, and the precision expected in vocal exercises left her dizzy with doubt. In rehearsals, she stumbled over scales and forgot lyrics, her heart sinking with each misstep. Whispers and curious glances followed her, and old fears crept back, threatening to silence her newfound courage. One afternoon, after a particularly tough practice, Lila sat alone on the conservatory's stone steps, the weight of the world pressing down on her small shoulders. That's when Elena found her, sitting quietly with a steaming cup of tea. She sat beside Lila and said softly, "I know this feels impossible right now, but remember why you're here. Technique can be learned, but the passion you bring, that spark, is yours alone." Lila looked up, eyes shimmering. "But I'm not like the others. I don't have their training or experience. What if I'm just pretending?" Elena smiled gently. "You're not pretending. You're growing. Every great artist started somewhere. The important thing is to stay true to your voice, your story." Renewed by Elena's words, Lila found strength in her vulnerability. She began to see each challenge as a step forward, not a failure. Slowly, her voice grew stronger, richer, shaped by lessons but always carrying the heart she had always known. When the time came to choose songs for the final showcase, Lila selected a simple, heartfelt piece, an old country lullaby her mother used to sing, filled with memories of rain-soaked evenings and quiet hope. It wasn't flashy or complicated, but it was hers. The night before the performance, Martin called. "No matter what happens, I'm proud of you," he said, his voice steady and warm. "You've already won by daring to follow your heart." Lila clutched the phone, tears slipping down her cheeks. For the first time, she felt she belonged, not because she was perfect, but because she was real. The night of the final showcase arrived with a gentle rain tapping against the grand windows of the Harmony Conservatory's auditorium. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation and soft murmurs of excitement. The polished wooden stage gleamed under the warm spotlight, framed by deep velvet curtains and rows of expectant faces. Lila stood backstage, her hands trembling slightly as she held the worn notebook close to her chest. The familiar scent of old paper steadied her, a reminder of home and the countless hours spent practicing in the quiet corners of her world. The pale blue dress Elena had gifted her, a simple garment stitched together from fabric scraps, felt like a shield woven from love and hope. As the announcer's voice echoed through the hall, introducing the performers one by one, Lila's heart pounded like a drumbeat calling her forward. When her name was finally spoken, a hush fell over the crowd. She stepped onto the stage, the spotlight blinding, the faces blurring into a sea of shadows. For a moment, doubt flickered within her, but then she remembered her father's words, Elena's encouragement, and the lullabies sung on rain-soaked nights. Taking a deep breath, she began. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." Her voice, soft but steady, wove through the silence like a gentle breeze, carrying memories of simple joys and quiet sorrows. Each note told a story of resilience, the warmth of a father's love, the ache of absence, and the courage to believe. The audience sat captivated, the music flowing not from perfect technique but from pure, unguarded emotion. A few wiped tears from their eyes, others sat still, holding their breath as if afraid to break the fragile spell. When the final note lingered and faded, the room remained silent for a heartbeat, then erupted into applause. Not the loud, boisterous kind, but a deep, heartfelt standing ovation that seemed to shake the very walls. Lila stood frozen for a moment, tears glistening in her eyes, overwhelmed by the wave of acceptance washing over her. In the crowd, Martin rose first, hands pressed to his chest, eyes shining with pride. Elena smiled knowingly from the side, her gaze soft but fierce with admiration. As Lila bowed, the fear and doubt that had clung to her like shadows melted away. She was no longer the quiet girl from the worn blue house at the edge of town. Tonight, she was a storyteller, a beacon, a voice rising from the quiet to fill a vast space with light. Backstage, as the crowd's cheers echoed still, Elena approached with a folded envelope, the official letter of full acceptance to the conservatory's year-round program. "This is just the beginning, Lila," she said softly. Lila smiled through tears, clutching the letter close. For the first time, she felt seen, not for perfection, but for the truth she carried in her voice. Months later, under the gentle glow of a spring morning, Lila sat beside her father at their small kitchen table, the same worn notebooks resting between them. The seasons had changed, and with them, so had Lila's world. The quiet girl who once sang only to herself now stood as a beacon of hope, proof that dreams nurtured in silence could bloom brightly. The acceptance letter from the conservatory had opened doors to new adventures, challenging classes, inspiring mentors, and friendships born from shared passion. But beyond the polished halls and glittering stages, Lila had learned the most important lesson: the power of authenticity. It wasn't flawless technique or applause that mattered most, it was the courage to share one's true self, no matter how fragile or unpolished. In a recent interview on a local radio show, Lila was asked what moment had changed her life the most. Without hesitation, she spoke of the night her father stood and applauded, not for a perfect performance, but for the girl who dared to sing her heart's song. "That moment," she said softly, "was when I truly felt seen. Not just by the crowd, but by someone who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Her story, once whispered only in a quiet town and hidden behind worn pages, had now reached ears across cities and hearts far beyond. Lila became a symbol for those who felt invisible, a reminder that the most powerful voices are often those that rise from the quietest places. And so, as the sun filters through your window and a new day begins, remember this: your story matters. Your voice, no matter how small it seems, carries a light the world needs to see. Stand tall, sing your truth, and know that even in the darkest shadows, hope blooms. Thank you for joining us on Lila Hart's journey. If her story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Together, we can celebrate the quiet courage in us all, and keep these beautiful moments alive in a world that sometimes forgets to listen. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep believing, and keep singing.